Hello and welcome to the New York Empire podcast presented by Greatest Ultimate Bag. I'm Hilton. He's Matt Pippin, Auletta. And Matt, we're going to dive right into the week's action because you gave a little bit of the edge to the Philadelphia Phoenix on the show last week over the Empire. And while Philly did take the 11-8 lead at the half and looked good, it was the Empire that came out the victors 21-20 when all was said and done, and they did everything they could. Now, don't obviously go through all of our talking points with your brief opening statement here, but as far as the big picture, yeah, the Empire probably could have taken an L there, but they didn't, and they won the game. And now at 5-3, with Montreal being 2-4, it looks like the Empire are that final team in the playoffs, and we'll see if they can make a run at DC or Boston to see who's going to host.
Yeah, I asked recently where the best player in the world was, and he really answered. I don't know if he listens, but Jack Williams really showed up. If you told me Elliott Chartock was going to have, 6 assists, 4 goals, whatever it was, just a plus 10 in the offensive firepower category, and that he wasn't even going to be the best player in the game, I would really question what happened. And the answer was Jack Williams happened. That is what you want out of your best player. He answered the call on defense when they needed it. Offensively, obviously, just awesome performance. Way to go, Jack.
Well, yeah, that's the right place to start. We're going to start with the roommates, Jack Williams and Elliott Chartock, who, as you mentioned, tied for a game-high +8. For Jack, it was 4 goals, 2 assists, 3 blocks. For Elliott, it was 4 goals and 6 assists. And from what I saw, I'm going to start with Elliott here because he did see multiple defenders over the course of the game, but primarily it was Peter Cushy, the young player who has really been an important player for Philly this year, and then Trevor Griezmann also jumping in and guarding Elliott at times. But he put on an absolute clinic as a handler with an understanding of space. That was most impressive to me about Elliott, as well as the 75 of 77 on the throws, over 560 total yards, grinding, doing all those little things, being the reset. But as I said, every time Philly would push him downfield, that's where I was really impressed by Elliott. You mentioned those 4 goals, just finding space, figuring out where was Philly taking you, and how do I take advantage of that? Where Elliott he wasn't overexerting, he wasn't trying to push himself in places that, he wasn't trying to go against the flow of the offense. He was just going with the flow of the offense. Again, okay, they're pushing me downfield, let me find those little pockets of space. All right, they're pushing me into the backfield, let me find that space, let me be the swing, let me release quickly, let me hold on and look for the deep looks. I thought Elliott was as perfect. Yes, he had the 2 turns, and one of them was just a throw behind, I don't remember who was coming in, but it was a throw on an in-cut behind the in-cutter. But either way, Elliott was terrific in the game. Maybe his best game of his career, I think, overall. I mean, it was I believe, the second most total yards by him in his career for the Empire. So, just a really good performance by Elliott in understanding space and doing all the little things that were required when you have so many players missing.
Yeah, and, he was amazing. Like you said, it was the space. He just kind of went with the flow. It didn't look like he was really just having to fight for anything. It looked so easy. I mean, there were a few hiccups for the team in the beginning, in the first quarter. They were, even before half, there were like 1 or 2 little miscues, whatever, but you could kind of tell they were like settling in with the unit they had available for the day. And as they progressed and as they it became so seamless and so pretty and everything looked so good. And, part of the ease was also Charles Weinberg just like filled in and handled a lot. Sometimes when Jeff Holm cut in, and there was no reset, he would just dump it and run across the field and get an easy pass back. I mean, they all just seemed to play really well together once the game settled in. It's something that is a little difficult when you're down, sometimes your nerves, you just think like everything just feels a little tighter, a little more frantic. And they responded so well to that. They didn't let it bother them. And, maybe that helps when Philly makes a mistake or 2 and your defense kind of gets you a little closer back into the game. But there's just no accumulation of pressure, it seemed. It just got easier, and it was great to watch.
Yeah, and I think why you started that point with Jack being that superstar guy, it's always great to see when a team kind of takes on the personality of the best player in the game. And that's what I felt for New York, where they took on Jack's very easygoing personality or vibes, whatever it was, because his Callahan to tie the game up at 15, huge play of the game. And was it a momentum swing? I'm not sure, because as you mentioned, everything did for the Empire kind of looked like, as I said, even when they went down, they were down 6-4 in the first quarter, then they were down 11-8 at the half, but it just felt like not a runaway train, but the opposite. It almost felt like Thomas the Tank Engine, where they were just the same pace the whole time. And then, I don't know how many Thomas the Tank Engine. I mean, obviously you're the parent, not me, but I mean, you know the story that there's always some little conflict that happens, and then Thomas has to figure it out and negotiate it. But it just felt like the whole story was going to work out for the Empire, just going kind of the same pace the entire time. And then the third quarter happens. They go up 8-4. Again, Jax Callahan in the third quarter did feel like that huge momentum swing that Empire might have needed. And that came on one of the 5 D points that he played, because Jack played a game high 26 points on the evening. And for all the other pieces we mentioned that were kind of fit in there that we'll talk about in a second here when we go through the D lines, it was a lot of burn for the regulars for the Empire. They were playing some major minutes there. Again, Jack played 26 points. Elliott played 24 points. Charles also played Jeff Holm played 24 points. Weinberg played 23 points, Haverfield 23. And yes, that's your O-line, but they also, all of those players play 2 or more D points as well, which just doesn't really happen on a normal day. And to fill out the rest of that O-line as well, Charles, Ethan Fortin jumping over, Jeff Holm, Liam Haverfield. The Empire committed just 7 turnovers at a team, and it's the guys that I just mentioned who touched the disc the most, Elliott, Jack, Ethan, and Charles. Those were the only players for the Empire with turnovers, because, and of those, no one had more than 2. And it's not about those 4 turning it over. It's just that nobody else for the Empire had a turn in the game. Nobody else for the Empire was playing outside of themselves, including the other member of the O-line that we have to introduce, as I introduced on the show last week, in Jordan Jeffrey, who had last played in 2018 with the San Francisco Flamethrowers. He had a goal and assist, but he's a 6'4", big handler, but he served as a downfield cutter. And I was trying to watch him on the offense throughout the game, but he did exactly what you wanted from a guy who hasn't played in the league since 2018. He just kind of was in the back of the stack when it was end zone sets, and the Empire only missed on 2 of their end zone sets. It was 14 of 16. And he was just kind of not even know where you needed to be, but just, all right, space, right? Like where can I create space for Jeff Holm? Where can I create space for Charles? He kind of cleared out everything, but because he's 6'4", Philly had to worry about, all right, if this 6'4" guy does leak out to the end zone, now we have a problem. So just being 6'4" and being in space was really helpful for what he was asked to do for the Empire O-line.
The Philly broadcast crew called him Ben Light Yacht, or Ben Yacht Light. Version. He was wearing the backwards hat and the leggings, and like it really, if you weren't paying close attention, you would have maybe just thought he was out there, right? And the number was 41, so just 4. It was close, but yeah, he filled in fine. That's all you need. I think with missing so many good players, I also think it allowed Jack and Elliott to really step up. I feel like Charles and Jeff Holm kind of played their same like consistent roles, and they played really well. Charles had a really nice sky though towards the end of the game. That was good stuff. But for Jack and Elliott, like when the team is so full of so many good players, sometimes everybody just does a little, and it's enough because you're all playing so well, and you're this evil Empire, and you don't have to do that much, and you cruise to victory, and everybody plays well. You get a few goals, a few assists, whatever. Nobody thinks much of it. You're missing so many people now between people who left last year and the people who are not available today. And they just said, like, all right, it's us. We need to win this game. We're going to do it. And they went all out, and they did it. They put the team on their shoulders, and they brought home the pretty important victory, because now the playoffs feel like they're a done deal. It feels like it's locked. You know who the top 3 are. You know who the bottom 3 are. I mean, I know certain teams aren't technically eliminated, but it feels like it's a done deal.
Yeah, again, rounding out the point about the O-line, Liam and Charles with big skies, as you mentioned, the 3rd and 4th respectively. And Philly, they had a bunch of hucks in the game, but the Empire also snagged a few of those 50-50s. And that's kind of is with the Phoenix. And if you kind of go toe-for-toe a little bit with those 50-50 balls, you're going to be in a really good spot against Philadelphia. And Charles, actually, the one that was most impressive, because you're talking about the one with 2:50 left to go that really did kind of put the game away, the sky over 2. But the one on the sideline, to me, with the 2 on his back, when the Empire were up 18-17, and then they went up 19-17 with that is actually, to me, what felt like the game. Because if he is out of bounds, or if they D that up, now they have a chance to make it 18-all, and then who knows with the Empire, with the Phoenix, I should say, getting those end of buzzer beater stuff and all those big bodies they have in Phillips and Pollard and who else that they can grab those late stuff with. But that kind of, to me, put the game away, that catch on the sideline. So a really good catch by Charles.
Yeah, I actually thought that Philly botched one or two of the end of quarter situation too. The one, I think before half, they were content to just like, all right, we have a lead. We're going to swing this disc back and forth in our own end zone, like 30 seconds worth of play. Like they didn't really try and advance. And then they took a shot that was whatever. It's like, you know, you've only won one game. I know you have a little bit of a lead here. Sure, don't let New York score. Maybe try and take the last shot, let time expire, but like just not handled very well. I mean, try and advance up the field, you know, get an easy goal. Even if you give New York 10 seconds, that's not a guaranteed goal. You know, they don't have Babbitt lurking back there. They didn't even have that many tall, big athletes for this game. So I thought they mismanaged that. And then I think Connor Russell got like a tip on the one. And then I think Jeff Holm got credited with the block because he caught it. But yeah, I mean, they even outplayed them in the end of the quarter situations.
It was interesting for Philly because I think there were some difficult choices they had to make. Or I should say there were choices they made that if they had won the game, then it's a huge payoff. And it looks like they made the right choices. But because they lost, then there are more questions about some of the choices that were made, including Pollard and Paul Owens primarily playing D-line in the game and Eric Nardelli playing on the O-line. And you want Paul Owens to get a heavy time on Jack because that's a pretty good matchup that Paul Owens does well with. But again, it didn't really bother Jack at all on the day.
No, I mean, not really.
Yeah. And then as we mentioned, Scott Heyman coming back from Pittsburgh. I mean, he was a problem. He was the best Philly player in the game, arguably the third best player in the whole game, using his insane speed. He's got height. He has throws, really just a total package, jumping back into that Philly O-line. But with all the pieces that they have, and that's kind of what I said in the preview, and I feel the same way about Philly, a team that's 1-6, and yet I look at their 20s and I go, they have all the pieces to win almost every game. And even the game against New York, starting with a break, including a huge sky by Nate Little, who, again, not only a tremendous athlete, but he's getting better and better as a thrower, a lefty, so really difficult to kind of figure out and navigate when he steps out and pivots well. So huge sky by him, and then James Pollard on the break. You saw that made a lot of sense when they took the break in the first point of the game. And then Max Trefillis as well. Fantastic first half from him, including the buzzer beater to end the first on the situation. So I said all the pieces are there for Philly, but then at the end of a game, because of the choices that they made or felt like they had to make, I go, did Philly lose this game or did the Empire win it? But I do kind of say that because of we mentioned with Elliott and Jack, that the Empire more won it than I think Philly lost it. The Empire were just the better team in the third quarter. And I don't know what Philly necessarily could have done much differently, but still, yeah, it's a 1-goal game. And Philly, their big star is it. I don't know. Yeah, there's something about it where it almost felt like, as you mentioned with the Empire, the opposite, where there were so many good players on Philly and they have all their pieces, including adding Scott Heyman, that kind of, everybody, all those stars, Sean Mott and Pollard, they all did a little bit less because they were all kind of sharing the wealth. And then because there's only one disc at the end of the game, they wind up losing by 1.
And they played well, too. I don't really want to take anything away from them. I mean, the hucks they were completing, thrown by a bunch of different people, too. I mean, those were beautiful throws. They were hitting people in stride, in space, everything. I mean, most of those throws, nobody even had to sky anybody. There was like 1 or 2 like slightly contested catches, but it just looked like running in space, like you would run a drill or like a warm-up drill or a practice rep. I mean, they were great shots, too. So, but in the end, yeah, it's a 1-point game. It was a lot of the smaller little things that really sabotaged them. There was like a kind of a low turf throw, just like upfield. I don't remember who threw it. It was just like a flick that didn't quite get there. There were just like little miscues here and there, and then Empire really made them pay, even without a top D line to like get those breaks. I know they put the offense in on occasion there, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, just. I don't know. It was not a bad game by Philly, and they, unfortunately for them, just still 1 goal short.
Well, let's talk about some of those role players for the Empire. Matt LeBar, who's had a good season, played 8 0 points, 10 D points, and again, filling in wherever he was needed. He just went wherever they needed him for any point. If he had to play 2 in a row, if he just had to jump onto the O-line here for this one, or be a big guy on the D-line, he had 2 goals and a huge layout block as well. Perfect 11 of 11 throwing day and no turnovers. So again, continuing just to be not one of the young players on the team that you're expecting more and more from, but just being a veteran presence. And doing exactly what he's being asked to do and not turn the disc over. Those are important things. And for those D-lines, Kenny Taylor actually had the most completions of any player playing primarily defense with 7 completions.
I actually wanted to say something about him. Early in the game, there was a point where he was like almost every other throw, and he was like marshaling this like break they made. And I was very excited. I was like, oh, maybe this is a great game where we're going to see him do a ton. And, then he had like 2 more throws after that all game. But it was still nice to see that somebody else besides like Ethan or Josue, or JR, who obviously wasn't available, could like marshal the defense really. And I didn't expect that from him, but it was a very nice point.
Yeah, as I said, he was the highest D-line thrower with 7 completions because they're not only were Anthony Nugent and Cat Stevens not going to watch this new D-lines figure it out, obviously, put that O-line back on the field, but they also weren't, as I said, playing outside of themselves. They were just kind of not even willing to, just toss it around and try to say, okay, the pressure's on us to break. They're like, well, let's just not turn the disc over, and if they decide to take the timeout on us, then they will. And I think that was probably the instruction before the game that like, hey, your job is to get the turnover. Don't worry about anything else.
Yeah, it also helps. I mean, one of the D points is a Callahan by Jack, so that reduces any throwing. Philly had another one where they miscued on a dump throw, and it went like 15, almost 20 yards just straight backwards. So then Empire just picked that up and scored quickly. I can think of another one where Shank just had like an easy around throw, I think, to Mike. They didn't really need to do much on defense. They accumulated a few breaks without needing a lot of throws. It was really only 1 or 2 points where it felt like that D unit actually even got to play with the disc.
Yeah, and after the game, Anthony Nunez had some quotes, had some good things to say about Tej Murthy, who, as I kind of profiled last week, is the young gun, one of the youngest players in Empire history, alongside Tristan Yarder, who also played in this game, who is now not one of the youngest players in Empire history. But Tej Murthy, then he had a goal in his 7 points, no completions, by the way, again, and that's what you want to see from a teenager. Just don't touch this, get in the end zone, be big, be a big presence. So he's being slowly integrated the way you want a young player to be integrated. And again, not only slowly, but in an important game, in a tight game, but just playing the 7 points and not doing anything that he's not being asked to do. And again, getting a goal, getting his little highlight, finding himself where he needed to be. And I mean, the sky is a limit for, I see those kind of big bodies. And no offense to us or other players that are our size, or even the younger players or players like a Shank, that is just, again, height is not necessarily on his side. But when you show me a player who's whatever Tej is, 6'3" or 6'2" at least, 6'4" at the highest, somewhere in that world. So yeah, when you give me a 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" young player, I go, yeah, the sky is the limit with that guy, because they learn how to throw. Obviously, they can step around any mark, and they're, to start as a good defender, or just a good athletic defender, you never know what their potential is. Again, no offense to the other ones who are, I'm sorry that I did throw Shank in there, but again, if you're 5'9" or lower, there's only so much that you can do, but you can obviously get better and better and better. But the high ceiling of those players, they can affect every part of the game at the UFA level. Yeah.
Seeing Tristan Yarder out there again, this is just like a little personal thing. He was the young guy on the team my last season, 2019. So I keep just hoping that he will play for like 20 years so that I can just continue to say like, hey, I played with that guy. He's still out there. Like, I'm not that far removed. So Tristan, if you listen, just, if you could just LeBron this and really stay in like peak physical shape for 20 or so years, that'd be cool. I'll be your biggest fan.
Well, he could be the trivia. I mean, again, I'm not putting any pressure on your kids, but there is this trivia that he could be the through line between you and your kids eventually. So there is something that could happen there.
We'll see. I can barely get them to kick a ball.
Well, they'll get there.
Yeah.
All right. On the other side, speaking of young players, by the way, not that young, not your kids young, but
they do like trampolines though. So maybe the jumping. I always loved jumping. So maybe there's hope.
Hey Ryan. Have you ever thought to yourself how you could fit everything you need for one weekend into a single bag?
And there's an incredible layout block.
Oh, there's a Callahan. Mike Dross did it for New York.
From cleats to jerseys to discs, pennies, water bottles, the greatest bag can help.
And this is going to be a greatest here.
This is going to be a Callahan for Ryan Drost.
Thanks to Greatest Bag for being a sponsor of the New York Empire.
Yeah, well, okay. Again, speaking of young players, but not that young, Toronto 1-6 with their one win coming in a blowout, 21-13 at home of the out-of-division Pittsburgh Thunderbirds. So they're over in the division. 2 losses to Montreal by 3 goals or less in the rivalry games. Now, it is a lot of glass half full if you want to, but then a lot of glass half empty here. The good news for them is that Akifumi Muraoka, who was returned after the pandemic, he's returned to the team and been just as good as the first go-around, again, the pre-pandemic era. Though with his insanely high usage, he does have 19 turnovers, which are a lot, 3 of those being on drops as well. But he has also been the only real huck-throwing option that they have, or huck-catching option that they have. He is 65% on 15 hucks with Ryan Politz and Adam Turcotte. They're next on the team with 3 hucks apiece, but really everything is running through him or Ryan Politz, who has been healthy and important. And then some young players taking on much bigger roles, Zachary Armstrong, Griffin McKee, Cameron Kennedy, and Dax Miller. Those players are all, I believe, 24 years of age or younger, and they round out the top 6 in plus-minus for the Rush. So it's just a ton of young players, and then a returning Muraoka, and then Ryan Politz being the veteran around. And other than that, I mean, Phil Turner has only been available for 3 games this year. Oscar Stonehouse, who was supposed to be like the next guy, played 5 games. Luke Kamire, who was their huge yard getter alongside James Lewis last year, 5 games for him. And all 3 of those are also out this week too. Plus no Cameron Kennedy either, unfortunately. So they are feeling a little shorthanded. And the 3 I mentioned, Turner, Stonehouse, Kamire, they were supposed to be the stars with the losses of James Lewis, Ty Barbieri, Mike McKenzie, and Wilkie Lewis, who are arguably, 4 of their top 6 players last season. So not having Brandon Adibe, by the way, who was on the Montreal roster last year, he's maybe the best defender on the team next to Phil Turner, and he has not played a game yet this season and still won't against New York. So as much as there are names I'm throwing out there, I mean, the Empire really don't know what you're going to get from week to week from Toronto because they are such a young team. And they're going to have to rely, as I mentioned, all the players who are not available this week, they're going to have to rely not only more so on Muraoka and put so much on him, but it's also new and newer faces every week for Toronto, which, again, does not lead to a lot of victories in the season.
Yeah, they're not really in a great spot. It's love to see it. I'll just let my bias show for a few seconds. I thought last year that they had some upside, and, it's unfortunate when people are not available or just not returning. In 2019, when we played against them, we game planned specifically against Akifumi. I specifically covered him a few times, played defense that last season, and Brian Jones gave me the green light to just mark as crazy and aggressive as I wanted. I was allowed to just spin in a circle and prevent any throw. BJ didn't care which direction the throw eventually went off. I had full green light to just go crazy for 7 seconds on a stall. And, we actually forced one. I think I forced one and somebody else forced another. We forced 2 turns in the playoff game just from over aggressive marking because we knew a little turn happy, a little trigger happy on some of those. So, yeah, I could see where the turns are accumulating, especially when the rest of the team around him is not nearly what it was back in the day. So, yeah, I imagine this will be a relatively easy game for New York with all the parameters you just listed.
Well, not only that, but the cavalry has returned as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's no Weinberg, no Agame Contreras, no Sam Jonas or Breton Tan this week. But as you said, the roster has just gotten deeper and deeper. Who knows the availability of the players that have kind of been called in the last 2 weeks now to help out. But Yacht, Randolph, Ryan Dross, Oliver Chartock, Antoine, and Rushmeyer Bailey, all those players are back. So, I mean,
what a list. What a list to just say oh yeah, by the way, we're back 1 week later. It's just you could roll out those. Was that 6 or 7?
That was 3, 6, 6.
Okay. Yeah. Well, throw one more name and you just that's a line that could just go beat most teams, in a game to 3. That's wild that they're all just back.
I mean, and I think Toronto's slight chance, they're the slight opportunity they might have in this game is that based on the forecast, the weather could play a factor. And the weather is because of the heat wave that's currently going on. It is a humidity-based weather thing, so it's not just like light rain the whole day or cold rain. No, it's supposed to be, coming through. Hopefully there are no delays. Again, knock on every bit of wood you have there. So hopefully no delays, but it's supposed to be very heavy, or maybe it might miss completely. It's one of those rolling in humidity storms. So weather could play a slight factor, but I think, again, the Empire and the talent and all that should be able to figure things out. Last player I actually didn't mention here, and shout out to Angelo Olchese, who has dealt with some injuries this season, also coming down from Boston. Again, just a veteran hand coming into that game against Philadelphia. Again, as you mentioned, there are players who sign up for the Empire knowing I might only play in a game or two every season, and yet when it's my turn, can I make an impact? Can I be one of those good players? So Angelo, I mean, the Empire, they do say this, but it doesn't work if everybody's not bought in. So Angelo's, again, none of those players who's bought in completely. So again, last word for you, I guess, and then I'll plug the next few weeks. But yeah, I mean, the Empire should get another victory. And if they get to 6 wins at this point, it does look like 6-3 would certainly be enough, regardless of what happens with Minnesota and, Salt Lake and then Minnesota and DC. It shouldn't really matter. I think the Empire are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah. And, it's a good opportunity in some of these upcoming games to, maybe see how one or two of the younger guys play against some of the better competition. Maybe you roster one or two, kind of give them a shot, see how it goes, and then you kind of figure out your rotation for the playoff games, which, it'll be crucial to get all of that right because you're not quite as stacked and powerful as you were in the past. But I still think if, they can learn a lot from these games, even if they do happen to lose some of the Super Series games, they'll still be in a good position, and I think they could still easily win these playoff games regardless of how it all shakes out. So I think we're in for a few exciting weeks as the regular season starts to roll down.
Well, as you mentioned, the Empire return home for Toronto in a divisional game on Friday, June 21st at 7 p.m. at Pippin Field. And then it's up to Hartford, 1 p.m. the following Saturday, the 29th, against Salt Lake at Trinity Health Stadium. So that is a huge one on the schedule. And then we'll worry about everything after that, basically, because, yeah, I mean, it was a victory there against Salt Lake in Connecticut against Trinity at Trinity Health Stadium. That really could galvanize the team to say, all right, now we're ready here. It's time. Let's go.
Yeah. And not to discredit the win they just got. I actually think that, winning against Philly when you're down so many great players, that's like also a galvanizing kind of thing for the top end players. It's like, hey, we can do this, or hey, I can take over when I need to. But then even for the lower guys, maybe it just builds up the aura mystique of the team again. It's like, no, we are still Empire. Like, we can still do this. The season's not a loss, because you never know how the team feels internally with a few, iffy performances here and there, especially against division rivals. So, it was a big win. It, might just be another win against Philly, but given how everything kind of shook out, it was a big win, and I imagine it felt really good for everybody who's there. So if they can carry some of that momentum, through Toronto into the bigger games, could be a jumping off point for a nice run.
Well, at least for all the history buffs, Toronto against New York. New York still has a little bit of work to do to continue to cut into all the dominance that Toronto did have. So always for the numbers, New York against Toronto. That's always a big one. So again, Friday, June 21st at 7 p.m., Pippin Field. Get your tickets. And of course, as always, we'll see you there.